What if I told you that the pain you're feeling right now, that deep, heavy weight in your chest, could become the very path to peace? Grief doesn't just knock on your door when you're ready. It arrives like a storm, uninvited, overwhelming, and often when you least expect it. But what if there's a way not to escape it but to move through it, with strength, with clarity, and even with grace? In today's video on daily Stoic habits, I want to walk with you into that emotional storm. Not to fight it, not to numb it, but to understand it through the lens of Stoic philosophy. Grief is not something we can control. It's not a choice. But what we do with it is. The ancient Stoics, thinkers like Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius, believed that while we cannot change what happens to us, we can absolutely change how we respond. And that belief is more than just comforting, it's empowering. So how can we face loss without collapsing? How can we carry grief in a way that transforms rather than destroys us? What if the deepest pain you've ever felt could also be your greatest teacher? I know, that sounds almost impossible when you're in the thick of it. When someone you love is gone, when a relationship ends, or when a dream you poured your heart into suddenly disappears. The idea that any of this pain could lead to peace feels far-fetched. But let me ask you something. Have you ever sat with your grief long enough to hear what it's trying to teach you? Grief comes in many forms. It isn't always about death. Sometimes it's the quiet ache of losing a part of yourself. Other times it's watching someone you care about drift away. And sometimes, perhaps the hardest of all, it's grieving the life you thought you'd have. That version of yourself you were so sure you'd become. No matter how it shows up, grief doesn't knock politely. It barges in, demanding your attention, flooding your mind with memories and your heart with questions. Why did this happen? Why now? What do I do with all this pain? The truth is, I've asked those same questions, and it was during one of the darkest chapters of my life that I turned to an unexpected source for guidance. Not a therapist, not a self-help book, but the ancient wisdom of Stoic philosophy. The Stoics, people like Epictetus, Seneca, and Marcus Aurelius, lived through war, exile, betrayal, and personal loss. But they didn't run from grief. They didn't pretend they were above it. They faced it head-on, not with bitterness, but with bravery. Not by silencing their emotions, but by understanding them. And that's what I want to share with you today, not just some intellectual theory, but a practical, compassionate roadmap for walking through grief with clarity, strength, and even peace. You see, Stoicism isn't about pretending everything's fine. It's not about suppressing emotion or turning cold. That's a misconception I used to believe too. But true Stoicism is about alignment, aligning your mind with what is real, what is inevitable, and what is within your control. The Stoics teach us that grief is not something to be avoided. It's something to be acknowledged, accepted, respected, because it's a natural response to love, a mirror of how deeply you cared. Epictetus once said, "It's not things that upset us, but our judgments about them." What he meant was, we can't control external events, death, loss, change, but we can control how we relate to them. That distinction alone has changed my life. Think about it. We spend so much energy resisting reality, wishing things had turned out differently, clinging to the past or fearing the future, and in that resistance we suffer more than we need to. The Stoic approach gently shifts that lens. It invites us to ask, what if we stop resisting? What if instead of fighting the pain, we learn to sit with it, to breathe through it, and, ultimately, to grow from it? That doesn't mean it stops hurting overnight. Stoicism isn't a magic wand. It's not a shortcut out of grief, but it is a compass, one that helps us navigate the storm without getting lost in it. When I lost someone close to me, the first thing I felt was helplessness. The second was anger. And then came the guilt, for not doing more, for not saying the right things, for moving on too soon or not moving on fast enough. But as I journaled my way through those emotions, as I sat in silence with Marcus Aurelius's meditations open beside me, I began to realize something powerful. My pain didn't mean I was broken, it meant I was human. And being human means feeling deeply, even when it hurts. One passage from Marcus struck me harder than I expected. He wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do, say, and think." At first, that sounded morbid. But then, it clicked. He wasn't being negative, he was being real. He was reminding himself and all of us that life is fragile, that every moment counts, and that grief, when seen through this lens, becomes a wake-up call to live more fully, more intentionally. In the days and weeks that followed, I stopped asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and started asking, "What can I learn from this? What can this loss teach me about love, impermanence, and what really matters?" It was then that grief started to soften. It didn't vanish, but it became lighter, less like a crushing weight and more like a quiet companion, one that walks beside me, reminding me to cherish what I have while I have it. And that's what Stoicism gives us. Not freedom from grief, but freedom within it. So if you're hurting right now, if you're trying to make sense of something that feels senseless, I want you to know you're not alone. You're not weak. You're simply human. And in that humanity lies a strength far greater than you realize. In this video, I'll be sharing with you the Stoic perspective on grief, not as a philosophy for the elite, but as a practical guide for everyday people like me and you. We'll explore how the Stoics understood the nature of loss, how they developed inner resilience, and how they used simple daily practices to move through pain without letting it define them. Because grief isn't the end of your story. It's a chapter, a difficult one, yes, but also one that can lead to deeper wisdom, clarity, and peace. If you're willing to turn the page. Grief is not a flaw. It's not a sign that you're broken or that you're doing life wrong. In fact, according to the Stoics, grief is one of the most natural responses a human being can have, because it comes from care, from love, and from the very same awareness that gives life its meaning. When I first stumbled into the world of Stoicism, I was looking for something, anything, that could help me make sense of the chaos inside me. I had just lost someone I deeply cared about, and I was drowning in a sea of conflicting emotions. Numbness one day, rage the next, guilt at random. That kind of emotional whiplash can make you question everything. But then I read something that shifted the ground beneath my feet. Epictetus wrote, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." At first I was skeptical. React? I didn't feel like I was reacting at all. I felt like I was being dragged. Like grief had grabbed me by the collar and thrown me into a room with no exit. But then I began to understand. The Stoics weren't saying we shouldn't feel grief. They were saying that grief is inevitable, and our relationship to it is where the power lies. You see, the Stoics never denied that loss hurts. They never taught that we should become emotionless statues. What they believed was far more human, that emotions are part of life, and that we suffer more when we try to avoid or suppress them. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor who faced incredible personal loss, from his children to his friends, once wrote, "Don't demand that things happen as you wish, but wish that they happen as they do, and your life will go smoothly." Now that's a hard pill to swallow when you're grieving. But when I sat with that idea, really let it settle, I realized he wasn't asking me to like what happened. He was inviting me to accept it, because reality doesn't bend to our preferences. No matter how much we cry, scream, or bargain, what's done is done, and the more we resist that truth, the more we suffer. But Stoicism doesn't stop at acceptance. It goes deeper. It teaches that grief is not just pain, it's a mirror that reflects what we valued, what we hoped for, and what we feared. When someone we love dies or something we dreamed of falls apart, we grieve not only the loss itself, but the story we built around it, the future we imagined, the comfort it gave us. And that's okay. That's human. Seneca, another Stoic thinker, wrote to his friend after losing his son, "Tears fall, yes, but let them fall from the eyes, not from the soul." What he meant was powerful. Feel the sadness. Let it move through you. But don't let it rot your core. Don't let it consume your ability to live, love, and find meaning again. For me, that shift in perspective was life-changing. It allowed me to cry without shame, to remember without guilt, and most importantly, to understand that grief was not my enemy. It was part of my healing. Stoicism also encourages us to reflect on the impermanence of everything. It's a concept many of us try to ignore because it's uncomfortable. But the Stoics? They faced it directly. Memento mori, remember that you will die, wasn't meant to be depressing. It was meant to wake us up, to remind us that life is fragile, and because it's fragile, it's precious. When I look back at the person I lost, I don't just mourn what's gone. I now try to cherish what was given. The conversations, the laughter, even the arguments, because they were real, they were life. And maybe that's the heart of the Stoic view on grief. It brings us back to what's real. It strips away illusions and forces us to confront the raw truth of being alive. That truth is both beautiful and painful, but in that paradox lies wisdom. So when you're grieving, remember, you don't have to be strong in the way the world defines strength. You don't have to pretend, you don't have to rush through your healing. You just have to stay present with what is, and trust that by doing so, you'll find your way through. Strength doesn't always look like stoic silence or unshakable confidence. Sometimes strength is showing up, puffy-eyed, tired, emotionally drained, and choosing to keep breathing. Sometimes it's letting a tear fall without judgment. Sometimes it's saying, I'm not okay today. And that's okay. The Stoics understood this deeply. They never defined strength as the absence of emotion. In fact, true strength, they believed, came from emotional clarity, not emotional denial. So when you're grieving, how do you cultivate that kind of strength? How do you rise not in defiance of your pain, but with it, beside it, as a companion, on the road to healing? It starts with self-reflection. When grief hits, our minds can feel like wild animals, thoughts rushing, looping, spiraling. One moment you're reliving a memory, the next, you're drowning in regret. Then you're suddenly numb, only to be flooded with tears an hour later. This is where Stoicism's practice of introspective stillness becomes powerful. Marcus Aurelius wrote daily in his journal, not for anyone else to read, but for himself. He used it as a mirror, a place to question, observe, and recenter. He didn't try to make his feelings go away. He tried to understand them. I started doing the same, and just a few minutes a day, I'd sit down, breathe, and ask myself, what am I feeling right now? What story am I telling myself about this pain? Is that story true, or just a reaction? That process helped me catch the emotional autopilot I had been stuck in. I realized that most of my pain wasn't coming from the loss itself, but from the narratives I was building around it. That I should have done more. That it wasn't fair. That I'd never be whole again. Those stories felt real, but they weren't helpful. And they weren't facts. They were judgments. And Stoicism teaches us that it's our judgments, not events, that cause most of our suffering. Next, I began practicing emotional resilience through presence. The Stoics didn't sugarcoat life. They expected hardship. They trained for it, like a soldier prepares for battle. Not by waiting until chaos hits, but by strengthening the mind daily. One of the simplest tools I found was mindfulness, being exactly where I am. Not yesterday, not tomorrow, just here. Grief wants to drag you into the past, to replay that last conversation, to relive the moment they left, to revisit what could have been. But Stoicism calls us gently back to the now, because the present is all we truly have. And you know what I noticed when I began returning to the present, again and again? The pain didn't disappear, but it stopped ruling me. The present moment, even in sorrow, had air, space, peace. The sun still rose. My breath still moved in and out. Life was still quietly unfolding, even through tears. Another powerful habit I adopted was practicing gratitude. Not forced gratitude, not toxic positivity, but honest appreciation for even the smallest things. A warm cup of coffee, a memory that made me smile, a kind message from a friend. Gratitude doesn't erase grief, but it balances it. It reminds the heart that not everything is lost, that there's still good even if it feels far away. The Stoics also encourage cognitive reframing, the art of choosing a new perspective. Instead of thinking, I've lost everything, I began to think, I was lucky to have had something, or someone worth grieving. Instead of thinking, this pain will never end, I told myself, this pain is part of growth. I am transforming, not breaking. Epictetus would ask, is this within your control? That question became my daily filter. Could I change what happened? No. Could I change how I held it? Absolutely. I also leaned into journaling, not just to vent, but to guide my thinking. I'd write down one thing I learned from my grief that day. One thing I still valued. One thing I hoped to become. Little by little, I began building a bridge, not away from my pain, but through it. Meditation became another ally. Just 5 or 10 minutes of stillness, focusing on the breath, letting thoughts rise and fall without clinging. The Stoics didn't call it meditation, but that's what their daily practices were. Intentional pauses. A moment to observe, to realign, to remember what truly matters. In those moments of quiet, something softened inside me. I stopped fighting my grief. I started walking with it. Strength, I realized, isn't the absence of grief. It's the presence of grace, the courage to stay open even when it hurts. So if you're watching this and wondering, how do I survive this? Start here. Breathe. Feel. Write. Walk. Talk. Cry. Rest. Reflect. There's no perfect formula, no instant fix. But the Stoics gave us tools, timeless, simple, profound, to help carry the weight without collapsing. Loss can feel like a door slamming shut. A chapter ending you didn't choose. And in the quiet afterward, it's easy to believe that nothing good could possibly come from what just happened. But here's what the Stoics teach, and what I've come to understand through my own grief. Meaning is not something that arrives on its own. It's something we build. At first, that idea felt foreign to me. I didn't want to find meaning. I wanted the person back. I wanted the old life. I wanted answers, not lessons. But over time, as the waves of grief softened from crashing to lapping, I started to see something else, a chance to grow. Not in spite of the loss, but through it. Seneca once wrote, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." It sounds harsh, but when I looked at it closer, I realized he wasn't glorifying suffering. He was pointing out that within suffering lies an invitation to become more aware, more compassionate, more alive. Grief cracks us open, but that crack lets light in and light out. It reveals what mattered most, what we may have taken for granted, and what's truly worth living for now. So how do we begin to find meaning in the midst of sorrow? It starts with a question I began asking myself every day. What is this loss teaching me about love? Because behind every grief is love. We don't mourn what we don't care about. That realization changed the way I viewed my own pain. It wasn't just emptiness. It was a reflection of how deeply I had loved and been loved. And in that light, grief became a tribute, a sacred reminder of the bond I had. Not something to be ashamed of, not something to hide, but something to honor. That shift allowed me to move from regret to remembrance. I stopped obsessing over what I could have done differently. I started focusing on what I had received, the moments, the memories, the connection that shaped me. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, loss is nothing else but change, and change is nature's delight. It's hard to see grief as part of nature, especially when the pain feels so personal. But when we zoom out, When we remember that life is constant movement, constant transformation, grief begins to feel like less of a punishment and more of a transition. That doesn't make it easy, but it does make it sacred. The Stoics also remind us of life's impermanence, not to scare us but to sharpen our awareness. Memento mori, remember you will die, is not morbid. It's a compass. It reminds us that every person, every experience, every breath is temporary, and therefore infinitely valuable. When I reflect on the person I lost, I no longer ask, why did it have to end? Instead, I ask, what did I gain from knowing them? How did they shape who I am? How can I carry a piece of them forward in the way I live today? And in that way, they're not truly gone. They live through my words, my choices, my character. This is one of the most powerful practices I've learned from Stoicism. Live in a way that honors what you've lost. Turn memory into action. Turn sorrow into virtue. Did you lose someone kind? Be kinder. Did they love deeply? Love deeper. Did they live with courage? Practice your own. The Stoics believe that a meaningful life is one lived in accordance with nature, and nature includes both birth and death, gain and loss. We can't cling to the people or things we love forever, but we can choose how their impact lives on through us. Another question I found healing: what would they want for me now? This question wasn't just comforting, it became guiding. Would they want me stuck in regret, or growing, living, laughing again? Would they want me numb or present? And so, little by little, I started living again. Not by moving on, but by moving forward with the memory. That's the difference. Stoicism doesn't ask us to get over anything. It invites us to integrate our experiences, to weave them into the fabric of who we are. This integration gave me purpose. And purpose, I've found, is one of the greatest antidotes to despair. It's not about finding some grand destiny. It's about simple things, helping someone else, writing something honest, creating moments of stillness or joy or connection. In that space, meaning quietly grows. It doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. The Stoic path through grief is not to erase the past or deny the pain. It's to face it with clear eyes, to let it shape you without hardening you, to live in a way that reflects what you've learned. So if you're still hurting, and chances are you are, I invite you to ask, what did this loss reveal about who I am? What am I now called to become? And how can I honor this pain without being defined by it? There comes a point, maybe not today, maybe not for weeks or months, when the fog of grief begins to lift just slightly, not all at once, not with clarity, but with a faint sense that there is still life ahead, and that life might still hold meaning. That moment can feel strange, almost like betrayal. You might find yourself smiling for the first time in a while, and then feeling guilty about it. You might go an entire day without crying, and wonder if you're starting to forget. But the Stoics would tell us, moving forward is not forgetting. It is remembering and choosing to live anyway. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Don't let the past and the future disturb you. Only the present is yours to live." That's where purpose lives, in the present. Not in rewriting the past, not in controlling the future, but in showing up today, even with a heart that still aches. So what does it mean to move forward with purpose after grief? First, it means accepting what is, fully, without resistance. Acceptance is not giving up. It's not passive. It's one of the most active, courageous things you can do. It means standing face to face with reality, no matter how painful, and saying, "This happened. I did not choose it, but I will choose what happens next." The Stoics believe that virtue, living in alignment with your values, is the highest good. And when everything else has been stripped away by loss, your values are what remain: kindness, courage, wisdom, compassion. You may not have answers, but you still have a compass. For me, that compass helped me make small decisions that slowly reshaped my life. I started waking up earlier, just to watch the sun rise, a quiet reminder that beauty still exists. I started calling the people I loved more often, knowing that time is never promised. I began creating again, not because I was healed, but because creating helped me breathe. And that's the truth about purpose. It's not always grand. It's not always career-defining or life-altering. Sometimes it's just showing up for the next moment with integrity. The Stoics also remind us to let go of the illusion of control. This one's tough, especially after loss. We replay scenarios. We imagine different outcomes. We cling to the thought, if only I had done something differently. But Epictetus reminds us, make the best use of what is in your power, and take the rest as it happens. That's not detachment, that's freedom. It's learning to give your full heart to what you can influence, and releasing what you cannot. So ask yourself, what is still in my power today? Can I speak with kindness? Can I support someone else who is hurting? Can I take one step toward rebuilding what matters? Every small action becomes a thread, slowly stitching meaning back into the fabric of your life. Another key practice is intentional presence. Grief often pulls us into the past. Anxiety pushes us into the future. But purpose is always here, in the moment you're living. When you eat, eat slowly. When you walk, notice the ground beneath your feet. When you speak, listen fully. These small acts are not distractions, and they are reminders. You're still here, you're still breathing. You still matter. And finally, living with purpose after loss means choosing to grow, not to erase what happened, but to transform because of it. Growth might look like setting boundaries, finally prioritizing your well-being. It might look like changing careers, writing a book, or helping others in ways you never thought you could. Or it might simply be learning to rest, to be gentle with yourself, to stop pretending you have to be strong all the time. The Stoics believed that suffering, when met with virtue, becomes transformation, not just survival, but rebirth. Seneca wrote, "No tree becomes rooted and sturdy unless many a wind assails it. The more it is shaken, the deeper its roots grow. Your grief does not make you weak. It's making you deeper, more present, more awake. So if you're beginning to feel the faint stirrings of movement and the quiet urge to live again, listen to that. Honor your grief, but also honor your becoming. You are not the same person you were before the loss. And that's okay. Who you're becoming now carries the memory, the love, the lessons, and something new. A resilience that cannot be taught, only earned. Grief isn't a problem to solve. It's a process to walk through. And though no roadmap can erase the pain, there are steps, grounded, human, stoic steps that help guide you back to yourself. Not to who you were before the loss, but to someone wiser, more rooted, and more alive than you thought possible. In this final part, I want to offer something practical, not just philosophy, but tools. Daily, intentional actions that have helped me and may help you heal without rushing and grow without forgetting. Connect with others, even when you'd rather withdraw. The Stoics valued independence but never isolation. They understood that while our inner life is ours alone to shape, we are not meant to carry every burden alone. Marcus Aurelius called us bees of the same hive. We're social beings. And grief, though deeply personal, thrives on connection. So, reach out, not with the pressure to explain everything, just to be seen, to be heard. Text a friend. Sit in silence with someone who gets it. Join a support group, even if you don't speak much at first. You'll be surprised at how healing it is to say "me too," or to hear it in return. You don't need a dozen people. One or two safe, non-judgmental souls can help carry you through the worst nights. Seek professional help, not as a last resort, but as a sign of strength. Stoicism encourages self-mastery, but that doesn't mean doing everything alone. Seeing a therapist, counselor, or grief coach doesn't mean you're failing to cope stoically. It means you're using every tool available to become the best version of yourself. Even Marcus had mentors. Seneca wrote letters to others as a form of shared reflection. We all need mirrors. And sometimes, the clearest ones are trained. Professionals who can offer a new angle on your healing. Therapy doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're committed. To growth, to truth, to peace. Return to your body. Gently. Grief lives not just in the mind, but in the body. Tight shoulders, shallow breath, sleepless nights. You might not even realize how long you've been holding your breath until you finally exhale. Begin small. Stretch for 5 minutes in the morning. Take a walk around the block without your phone. Feel your feet touching the ground. Let the wind, the sun, the rain, whatever's present, remind you you're still here. The Stoics believed in training the body as a discipline of the soul. But in grief, the goal is not control. It's reconnection. You are not just your sorrow. You are still a whole, breathing, moving being. Treat yourself as such. 4. Engage in meaningful activities, even if joy feels far away. When you're grieving, joy can feel wrong, like something you have to earn back, but you don't have to wait until the pain is gone to engage with life again. In fact, waiting for grief to end before living often extends the suffering. Start small. Cook a meal you used to love. Work on a creative project, even clumsily. Volunteer somewhere, not because you have to give, but because giving reminds you of your ability to impact others. The Stoics taught that purpose lies in action, not in chasing happiness, but in doing what aligns with your values, even in pain. Each step becomes a vote for life. And slowly, those votes add up. Journal. Not to be eloquent, but to be honest. Your journal isn't for anyone else. It's a mirror, a witness, a friend. Use it to dump your unspoken thoughts. Write a letter to the one you lost. Write a conversation with your future self, the one who made it through. Ask questions. Don't worry about answers. I often wrote, I don't know how to do this, but I'm trying. And some days that was enough. Marcus Aurelius didn't write meditations to publish them. He wrote to himself, to stay grounded, to stay human. You can do the same. Practice micro moments of mindfulness. Grief overwhelms. Mindfulness grounds. You don't need to meditate for hours. You just need to pause, to breathe, to notice the steam rising from your tea, to feel the texture of your sweater, to listen, really listen, to the birds outside or the silence in your room. These moments remind your nervous system, I am safe. I am here. I am whole, even when hurting. Stoicism and mindfulness share a common core, awareness without judgment. When you can observe your grief without being consumed by it, healing begins. Forgive yourself for not healing faster. There is no timeline. No perfect curve of recovery. Some days will feel open, light, even joyful. Others will feel like square one. That's not failure. That's being alive. Grief is cyclical. It returns in waves, in anniversaries, in smells, in songs. The Stoic doesn't fight the waves. They surf them. Not with force, with awareness, with flexibility, with trust. Trust that each time the wave comes, you're a little more prepared, a little stronger, a little more you. If you've made it to this point in our journey, I want to say thank you, not just for watching, but for being brave enough to walk through the storm with open eyes and an open heart. Grief doesn't end, but it transforms. And in that transformation, we find something precious: perspective, compassion, strength. The kind that doesn't need to shout, the kind that simply is. As Epictetus might remind us, you are not disturbed by the world, but by your thoughts about it. And when your thoughts are clear, your path, even through grief, becomes illuminated. So live fully, love deeply. And when grief visits again, as it surely will, greet it not as a stranger, but as a teacher. And remember, you are not alone. Due to time constraints, we will stop here. I hope this video is useful to you. If it can help you even a little, I will feel very satisfied. Save the video to your playlist if you want to listen to it again at any time. Please like and share it with many people because sometimes a timely message can change a life. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel Daily Stoic Habits. Press the notification bell so you don't miss the next valuable videos. Goodbye and see you again.